We see the world change dramatically, continuing. Now, China-US just reached certain kinds of trade deals over the past few days. Your take on the content, on the impact?
One of the many episodes, there have been many, there will be many moments of tensions and then moments of relaxation. So I think what we have to look at the medium long-term trend, which unfortunately is an intensification of this rivalry, which is the 21st century big problem, given that both have the ambition to be the number one. And the problem being that there is only one number one. So we have to look to this rivalry for the years to come, hoping that it will not degenerate in an open conflict, which is uncertain. So as long as this is a trade war, this is not a war.
We are seeing a tariff war, one country against the rest of the world. We certainly see this trade deals, quote unquote, being reached at one point or another and being torn away not long after. So is it really about a competition, or is it about a fundamental change of approach about trade by one nation?
It's a fundamental change of the US trade policy stance, but this is not a revolution in global trade. The US is 13% of world imports. As long as the remaining 87% behave and refuse to be contaminated by these protectionist fevers, global trade will keep moving forward. Now, the US have taken their own way. They probably will have to pay for that in terms of inflation and damaging consumer purchasing capacity, probably. So be it. But the big question is whether others will follow. I do not think so, and I think they should not.
Where is Europe in this?
Europe remains of the view that open trade is the way to go. Europe has a relatively low rate of growth as compared to US or China or India. The world economy on average is growing more than the EU economy, so the EU has a normal tendency to go and get growth elsewhere, which means opening trade both on the import and export side, thus exploiting the situation where the EU has an export comparative advantage.
There used to be belief that when US and China are competing with one another on and off, it gives Europe, at least the EU, a certain advantage strategically to work with both, while at the same time be able to improve its economic environment and growth. Did it happen or not?
Yes, it happened during the time when geoeconomics were dominating geopolitics and where issues of power were not center stage. So the EU is a big, large, deep economy and is economically powerful if it is about economy. But the problem is that the world has changed. And EU now has to adjust to a world which is dominated by geopolitics and where brutal power matters, as we see, for instance, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So EU was born in a world where peace was the order of the day, dispute settlement, legal processes where rules, sort of rule of law. It has changed. We are now with the rule of force, and this is a situation to which the EU will have to adjust, and it probably will take a bit of time.
What is EU doing efficiently at all when it comes to negotiations and competitions with the United States? When it comes to tariffs, when it comes to the next stage of interaction with the United States, whether it's on security or other issues?
In this world, which is now dominated by force and not by law, the EU is weak. And the reason why the EU is weak is that we still need the US military and strategic protection, notably against Russia. This is the reason why the EU had to accept in Canberra a very unbalanced deal. The EU did not want to provoke Mr. Trump to say, well, if you start being unnice to me, I'll move out of Ukraine. For us, Europeans, Ukraine resisting the Russian invasion is much more important than losing a few market share on the US market. The order of magnitude of these two issues is very different, although I recognize that seen from the rest of the world, it might not be always understood.
When you say more depend on security when it comes to the United States, but the trust between the two sides we certainly have witnessed across the Atlantic has been ever eroding. Maybe it's too early to say it's already gone, but certainly that has been eroding. So for something like an EU, how to articulate how much it can trust the other side, even when it comes to security, and how will that factor weigh with the negotiations on trade and economic issues with the United States?
The big change in the transatlantic relation is that Mr. Trump wants to monetize US protection. It's like in the Middle Ages, there is a lord, and there are barons, and the barons side with the lord because the lord has the biggest army and protects them. So this is the situation. We still need the US, and we now have to pay for that, either budget-wise, which, by the way, makes some sense, or tariff-wise, which, by the way, does not make sense, but given our strategic weakness, for the moment, we have no other option. And the consequence of that is that EU has to become stronger in economy, in tech, in defense, in military capacities. That's the way to go. It will take time.
How much will a multilateral trading system like the World Trade Organization work for the EU to have more cards on the hand to work with other trading partners across the world, minus US?
I think this is the right scenario. It's what we trade wonks call WTO -1. The US have de facto exited the World Trade Organization. They haven't left legally, and they will not leave legally, not least because the WTO has a trade-related intellectual property agreement that is very important to the US. So, but de facto, Mr. Trump considers that the way to go is to close trade, move tariffs, which is totally contrary to the whole WTO Bible. Now, can the WTO survive this? Yes, if others than the US keep moving forward, and it might, in some cases, be easier to be moving forward without the US. In other cases, it's going to be more difficult, but it's a different situation.
What about China, another option? How much willingness is there for the EU, for example, sir, with your observation, to work with Beijing?
On the bilateral side, the way to go is simple. China has to open more to the EU, trade-wise, and the EU has to open more to China investment-wise. That's the big game.
You were doing an interview a few months ago and you said it humorously, and yet smartly at the time when you say, when we think about China, the trade relations, we should do what China did 30 years ago, which is, if you want cooperation, bring your manufacturing to us and bring your companies to us. But there are complaints coming from Chinese business persons that I've been talking to over the past few months, including during the APEC. They say the business environment, investment environment keep on changing. They are not certain whether they're welcomed in most of the capitals. Your thoughts, sir?
I don't think that's a problem. There are bilateral investment treaties between member states and China. Of course, it probably would be better if the EU-China investment agreement was cleared, which it is not yet the case. But I think Chinese companies investing in Europe know that Europe is a stable place with a proper legal system, with disputes that are according objectively by well-run dispute settlement systems. So I don't think there's a big risk for a Chinese investor to invest in Europe other than behaving according to the agreements that have been taking place. But I agree that the way to go is to do what we did with China 30 years ago. Yes, that's the way to go. But it's not a joke. That's the way it should work.
But what about pressure coming from Washington? Say, well, you Europeans cannot do that. And therefore, the Chinese business will be left there alone and thinking, well, now what can we do?
Yeah, but this is true in a number of limited cases. But this is true whether China is in Europe or whether China is in China. That doesn't change the scope, unfortunately, in my view, of US extraterritorial sanctions. So the issue is not whether EU should resist or not. The issue is whether the reasons why the US have problems with China are grounded or not. And there may be cases where this is grounded.
We have seen several issues being discussed between China and the United States. Now, how much do you think the EU should take in that opportunity of window opportunities, some suggest, sir, and make sure this is also the moment that EU can move forward, not only for its own agenda, but also be able to work with others so that it can be more sustainable?
That's the way to go, as long as the name of the game remains an economic and trade game. The moment it becomes a power and strategic game, then, for the moment, the EU is clearly handicapped. But the World Trade Organization is about trade, and it's not the World Atomic Organization. So there is a space where EU and China together can try and move things forward in the World Trade Organization, like on this trade environment nexus or in facilitating e-commerce and digital trade. So there are areas where it can move forward.
We see China has already become an innovation leader, whether it is AI, robotics, or many other fields. And EU certainly wants to develop those capabilities with partners. How much space does that create for China and EU on an equal basis?
You're absolutely right. In a number of areas, China is now ahead of EU in innovation and tech. Take electric mobility, for instance, is clearly the case. So again, the way to go there is for EU to say to China, welcome to Chinese investment production in Europe with the necessary ownership and technology transfer provisions. I think this is the way to go.
But the question also is for Chinese businesses, why should I go there? Right? I mean, I have this technology, I can do it easily, I don't have to go through those taboos, and why should I go there? Unless there's tremendous pressure coming from EU policies say, if you don't do this, we cannot give you the market, or the market is closed.
That's China investing in Europe is the way to rebalance China's macroeconomic model. China has invested too much at home, hence these overcapacities, hence this trade surplus, and not enough abroad, which would contribute to rebalancing the macroeconomic Chinese system.
What is the problem now that people don't appreciate the backdrop why we have prospered? The world has been more connected than ever before. There has been, whether you call it globalization or something else, anyway, that brings our distance closer.
Yes.
And we are working on shared supply chains.
Yes.
And we are sharing our talents,
yes,
the technologies, everything. Why people fail to realize the backdrop of a lot of things that they take granted today?
3/4 of the world want globalization to keep moving forward because they see this, they look at what happened with China, for instance, and they believe China grew the way it grew because of globalization, and they are right. So that's the way to go, but we now are in a world which has been brutalized and where this stiff competition between US and China has changed the game. So at the end of the day, I hope that at some stage, both US and China will understand that this is not good for the world, which they may not care a lot about, but this is not to be good for them. And it's the moment both US and China will realize that this fight is not conducive to better social and economic development that things might abate.
You heard US talking about America first. You heard China, on the other hand, talking about the key is opening up. The key is growth based on opening up. The key is about making the pie bigger and share it more along the line with more people. Very different things coming from both sides. It seems that you are giving them equal comments. Is that fair?
I would say that Trump today is on the wrong track to open trade because he likes tariffs. I would say, looking at the preparation of the 15th plan in China, that there is both the notion that China should open, but also the notion that China should be strong enough in increasing self-sufficiency. So China is taking it both ways. US, for the moment, is taking it one way.
Mr. Lamy, as always, such a pleasure to see you, sir.
My pleasure.
And also to borrow your wisdom. Thank you,
Many
sir.
thanks.
Thank you.
Very good.